Hello everyone, welcome to Any Pluto. Let's start the video. Story starts with a young fellow lying oblivious on a lush field. As he got up he pondered where he was and understood that he was presumably not in Japan or even Earth, and he was unable to try and recall his own name. At that point he saw a clear screen before him and heard a voice inviting him to his new world. The voice additionally clarified for him that because of some choice cycle he has been conceded the option to immigrate into a different universe. Then the voice let him know that he at present has no recollections of his past life, except for he ought to have confidence since he surrendered his assent before he was brought to this world. Hearing this he got unsettled, yet the voice wouldn't fret and let him know that this new world is a dreamland loaded up with extraordinary weapons and enchantment, and that he ought to check his status screen to see the subtleties of the abilities he is. Checking his status window he found that he is Kelvin, that he is of the summoner class, and that his abilities, for example, gathering and examining eyes, are both of the S rank, while his green wizardry expertise is of the F rank. The voice then, at that point, let Kelvin know that he was the person who picked these abilities by designating a put number of ability focuses. Kelvin, thinking he has no memory of that, chose to look at what those abilities truly do, and he figured out that with his bringing expertise, which was S rank, he can take on adherence by laying out an agreement, and his investigate I enabled him to peruse an objective status, and he can utilize his capacity on residing creatures and things that are yet to be examined. Kelvin additionally found that his F rank ability green wizardry permitted him to control earth and wind, and he likewise saw a few abilities, for example, twofold development rate, twofold expertise focuses, and experience sharing that will help his development and stepping up. Following that he got some information about how gathering functions, and he discovered that right now the agreement is laid out. His supporters will be changed into mysterious elements, and they will be absorbed into his pool in the wake of understanding how calling functions. Kelvin say thanks to the voice which he had named Menu-san for the clarification. Menu-san then got some information about making a beeline for the closest town so he could enroll at the courageous organization in the town. Shockingly, Kelvin told Menu-san that when they talk he feels like he's conversing with a genuine individual, and he inquired as to whether Menu-san will likewise be showing up with him to the town. Hearing that Menu-san showed him her status, Kevin saw that her name was Melvina, yet he was unable to see anything aside from the name Melvina. Then, at that point, let him know that gathering him was whenever she first saw an individual intense enough to request that a goddess become his devotee, and she prodded him that he needs to assume liability as her sweetheart. As Kelvin heard every one of these, he considered what had occurred before he was immigrated en route to the town. Melfina let him know that he traded his recollections for more ability focuses, and afterward he squeezed the goddess of resurrection for an agreement, telling her he had fallen head over heels for her, and that even without his recollections he would in any case fall head over heels for her. Then Kendon inquired as to whether he could bring her since they were contracted, yet Melfina answered that he can't right now since he doesn't have the enchanted influence to call her. Kelvin then, at that point, chose to acquire an adequate number of levels so he would have the option to call Malfina. On getting to the town he went to the Globetrotters Society constructing and enlisted as a position F. Traveler. Melvina then asked him for what reason he composed Green Mage as his group, and Kelvin then answered that since he knew that summoners are uncommon he needed to partake in this dreamland with next to no difficulty. Following that he asked the assistant that enrolled him how the organization framework functions, which she did, and let him know the 4 kinds of missions that he could do as an explorer, which were oppression, guardian, reaping, and remarkable, and that after he finishes 10 journeys in succession he could be elevated to the following position. Later Calvin was seen battling in ooze as he had acknowledged the journey to enslave 3 oozes. He had a wooden pole with him that he purchased with the remainder of his cash. This bar couldn't bargain any actual harm, yet it contained some enchanted that he may as yet use. As he was battling the ooze, Melvina advised him to utilize his examine eye on the ooze, which he did, and Melfina let him know that beasts that don't comprehend words should have been debilitated before they were able to submit, and assuming he enacts the agreement at that point the beast will assent. Kelvin then chose to check it out, and as he enacted the agreement he felt something leaving his body, which Malfina told him was presumably because of him utilizing a lot of MP at the same time, and that endeavoring to lay out an agreement depletes half of an individual's MP whether or not they are effective or not. After effectively laying out the agreement with the sludge he gave the ooze the name Clotho, and he understood that he could feel Clotho's Sentiments straightforwardly. Melvina then clarified for him that he could clairvoyantly speak with his supporter and Kelvin called Clothos so they could enslave the remainder of the ooze as they battled. Kelvin saw that Clothos' speed and powers have expanded and Malfina advised him to look at Clothos' status again with his analyzer eye. After checking, he was stunned to find that all of Clotho details have expanded colossally. In the wake of finishing the journey, he accepted his prize and pondered internally that being a globetrotter could truly suit him since he had a sizable amount of cash to find a hotel for the night. En route to the motel, he saw a half-mythical person that was being shown by a vendor as a slave available to be purchased. He needed to act, yet unexpectedly disregarded what he was and left. Kelvin was finishing a journey. He found he had stepped up, and presently Fina advised him to check his ability tab in the UI, and she likewise educated him that expertise focuses can be utilized to gain new abilities. Kelvin then, at that point, inquires as to whether everybody in this world knows about the UI, to which she affirmed his presumption and let him know that they just need to call for status inside their psyches to raise the UI. Anyway, for somebody to peruse someone else's status, one unquestionable necessity. The investigator, subsequent to checking his status, he uncovered that because of his twofold development rate and twofold ability focuses capacities, he has become all the more remarkable and presently has north of 100 ability focuses. Following that, he chose to look at the expertise tab just to figure out that there were a ton of abilities he could get. Subsequent to looking at the abilities, he found that the expertise focuses expected to purchase a F rank expertise were 10 SP, which was so low. Then Malfina cleared up for him that his conditions were unique, and for that reason he had a very sizable amount of ability focuses, though for others they could get ability focuses as they stepped up. Kelvin then chose to pick the camouflage abilities so he could conceal the data about his interesting expertise. He then, at that point, evened out it up to rank D with 70 SP, and he likewise saw that Clotho had likewise stepped up and furthermore had another ability called retention, which it can use to retain enchantment and convert it into energy. After this, Kelvin became presumptuous in his capacities since he had the option to finish the journey effectively. Melvina then, at that point, informed him not to be pompous and that there are few unusually influential people who might have advanced into more elevated level creatures. Hearing this, Kelvin inquires as to whether all beasts advance when they arrive at a more elevated level, yet Malfina answers that level isn't the main condition for development and he chose to rapidly step up in some cases. Later, Kelvin was complimented by the assistant at the Explorer organization working for having finished 10 missions in succession, and she informed him that he had been elevated to rank A. She then continued to inquire as to whether he had filled in as a court mage in one more country before, since he could rank up in no less than a week and was doing journeys that were over his position. Yet Kelvin concocted a rationalization and told her he was unable to delve into subtleties. The woman apologized for getting into his own life. Kelvin then inquires as to whether he could now begin taking position D journeys, to which the woman answered that he would be able, yet she encouraged him to basically get some new gear since he was all the while utilizing the old wooden bar. At that point, a young fellow uncovering entered and let him know that in the event that he was searching for a rank A journey, he ought to go along with him on the Dark Soul Oppression mission. When this young fellow said this, the secretary was frightened, and she tended to him as relaxed, then asked him how his past journey went. Cashel answered that she should ask him, and he told her he had finished it with no hitches. Kelvin then hindered them and asked what his identity was, and Cashel then, at that point, presented himself as Cashel and a position the Globetrotter. Yet Kelvin, who had utilized the dissect eye, saw that he has the strength of a position B and furthermore the title killer. The other swashbucklers saw that Cashel was talking with the new B, and they contemplated whether they ought to surrender. Kelvin a few heads concerning Cashel, yet easygoing gazed at them and they generally fell back since there was nobody that was more grounded than Cashel. The assistant attempted to stop Cashel by letting him know that Kelvin just evened out up to rank E, yet Cashel answered that he and his party would have the option to safeguard Kelvin. Would it be a good idea for anything occur anyway? Kelvin said thanks to Cashel for the proposition and let him know that he doesn't mean on joining his party. Hearing this, Cashel provoked him for being terrified, yet Kelvin proceeded and let him know that he would rather be taking on the journey himself. Kelvin recommends that they contend to see who will overcome the Dark Soul Knight first. After relaxed left, Malfina inquired as to whether he truly needed to finish the mission, and he answered that he realized that it was presumably a snare since Nobody with a title like Killer will be a fair individual, yet he would utilize this chance to test himself. Getting to a rear entryway, Cashel got together with his party individuals Raji and Gimmel, and he asked what their considerations on Kelvin were. Kimmel answered and let him know that since he was unable to see Kelvin's status with his own status seeing eye, which was at rank C, then Kelvin may be a greater fish than they expected anyway. Raji got fomented on hearing this, and he anticipated battling Kelvin first, yet he was come by Cashel and Gimmel, who advised him to quiet down at the prison, the old palace of malicious spirits. Cashel and his party individuals arrived and were stunned to find that all the undead had been dealt with, and they realized that it was likely Kelvin's doing. At that point, Kelvin called their consideration and let them know that the Dark Soul Knight is behind a specific entryway, yet Easygoing asked him for what reason he didn't battle the Dark Soul Knight since they are contending anyway. Raji inferred that perhaps he understood that he was unable to overcome the Dark Soul Knight all alone and was holding on to collaborate with him, yet Kelvin answered that he actually had the expectation of winning the opposition, yet since he knew that he was their objective, he stood by so they could close their battle before the victor battles the supervisor. Understanding that Kelvin knew about their arrangement, Cashel inquired as to whether he was an organization employee, or then again, in the event that he came for Raji's abundance. This caused Raji to infer that Kelvin was an abundance tracker, and to that end Kelvin utilized the disguise expertise of higher position. Then Kelvin insulted Raji to go after him, which Raji hurried toward him to do, just to wind up in a snare laid by Kelvin. Raji had a go at breaking liberated from the snare, yet Kelvin didn't permit him to. Witnessing this, Gilmore attempted to take off, yet he was come by Clotho, who is presently at level 12 and furthermore has the title Oozed Latonia. Gilmore couldn't move in the wake of seeing the monstrous sludge because of shock, and Clotho utilized the Devourer expertise on him. Thanks for watching my video. Please like and subscribe to Any Pluto.